Hello and welcome to my next 5 tips for Stellaris 2.2 and the MegaCorp DLC. I did another top 5 tips video about a month ago that seemed to be very well received. It got a lot of likes and a lot of views. It was easily my most liked and my most viewed video, so I did want to thank people at the beginning of this one who may have been there for the last one. That felt really good and encouraged me to do a lot more of these types of videos in the future. I'm to be trying to give tips not just for Stellaris but other games like Sunless Seas, which comes out next week, I believe January 31st. So yeah, I should be doing another tips video on that pretty soon after release. I've been playing this game quite a bit over the past month, and I think these next 5 tips are a little bit more nuanced than the last ones. They might take a little bit less time to talk about because they're just one or two of them are just like little things that are very easy to cover, and then one or two of them might require a little bit more of a discussion. So yeah, let's just jump into it. The first one is how to create vassals. I noticed that they moved that to a slightly different place. It used to be, I think, in the planet option menu, and now they've taken it and hidden it underneath, I believe, sectors. So if you want, you can come in here, create a vassal, select a name and a species. Since this is an Iron Man save that I'm recording for my YouTube, I'm not actually going to click this button. I don't want to actually have a vassal, but all you need to do is click that and I'll take all the planets inside this sector and turn it into a vassal, which would be pretty bad for this one. I don't want to turn that one into a vassal unless I really am over my empire sprawl and it's starting to really hurt things like campaign costs, because campaigns can be very expensive. What are they underneath here? Campaigns can be very expensive. This can really be knocked up by empire sprawl, so I would recommend creating vassals if your empire sprawl starts to get a little bit out of control and you just don't know what to do about it. That's all I had to say on that, so let's move on to the next one, which is a discussion on some of these new civics. I'm playing with the Aristocratic Elite, which is a pretty fun one. You get a unique building called Noble Estates, which are very interesting. They give you extra stability, and I like stability. Stability is something that I didn't really notice at first because it's kind of hidden off to the side, and you don't really need to pay too much attention to it if you've got a peaceful empire and you're not conquering a lot of people. But things like crime and overcrowding, low amenities, which are things that can result from conquering another person, they can reduce your resource production and trade value. So it's really nice having that extra stability from the civic. It's pretty good for rushing. It's just pretty good in general in case you've got like a cartel who's making crime in your space. But one interesting thing about this is that you can't combine it with any of the other new ones. If I scroll around here, we'll see Byzantine Bureaucracy cannot go along with Aristocratic Elite. So if for some reason you really need to reduce your pop housing usage, you can always pop over to this at the cost of your Aristocratic Elite, which could be pretty costly because that's going to delete your noble estates, and then you can build some other things in this slot to kind of take care of that stability problem and or get yourself some more housing. There's a lot of other great ones in there, not just Byzantine Bureaucracy. Like I think there's Technocracy, which works slightly different than the others. This one works like the others. You can't have it or Aristocratic Elite or Byzantine Bureaucracy. We do have Exalted Priests in here, which is another nice one. Gives you some unity. Priests are pretty good, so I do like Exalted Priests. Down here there's another one that works a lot like them but is slightly different. Shared Burden doesn't work with Technocracy. Slightly different than the others. These are all pretty fun ones to play around with, and I think they're going to be pretty powerful because they were just introduced in the most recent update 2.2. And that's all I had to say on that. So let's move on to our next tip, which is focus on food production, especially early on in a game. You're going to want lots and lots of food. And I think one thing people miss is that farmers produce a lot more food than miners produce minerals, and technicians produce energy credits. If you actually look at the job-based production, it's 8 for both energy and minerals and 12 for food. So it's a lot easier to grab food using your own pops in the early game at least. And then you can, if you got a lot, you can go over here and encourage planetary growth, which you should almost always be doing. And if you've got enough food for that, and the policy, what is policies under F6, and the nutritional plentitude policy, you're going to have a lot of pops very quickly, and pops are power in this build, so I would recommend that you get that stuff going as early as possible. Focus on food as early as possible. It may as well be your first thing that you build on your capital, because this planet isn't going to be anything too special unless you hyper focus it on research, which we have here. You may have noticed 700 research, pretty good. It's better than Science Nexus, right? That's because we focused all of our stuff on energy here, but initially we didn't do that. Initially we went food and then transitioned over to research. So that's all I had to say on that. I think we're ready to start talking a little bit more about stability. I was talking about that earlier when we were talking about the aristocratic elite civic, so there isn't too much to say on here except for I think it's really important to focus on this in all parts of the game, early game and mid game, because that will allow you to just have more production and to snowball, and in the late game continue that snowball going. If you have low happiness, that's going to be a problem for your stability. I haven't played around with empires that don't have happiness, so I imagine there's a mechanic that works like stability, but I haven't seen that just yet. I know there's more I wanted to say about this. Oh yeah, well, I guess I did want to talk about how crazy the production is on this planet when we were looking at research. This plus 25% on jobs stacks nicely with the research assistance on this planet, but it stacks even better on this planet, who has a tech world modifier, just 5% compared to the 12% we're getting here, the 20% we're getting from this. It's not nearly as good as those other things, but it's still going to increase our overall production, like almost 1,000 physics research right off this planet. Yeah, that's definitely better than a Science Nexus. Science Nexuses are still good because they don't require pops, but I think specializing your planets like this is very, very important. I'd recommend getting a research planet, a forge world, and then putting some research on your capital as early as possible. Anything else you want to do is nice, like having a refinery world, having an industrial world is nice, but only really once you get to the mid game and the late game. If you keep your empire small, if you build tall, it's going to be a lot easier to maintain stability. So I'd recommend you build tall, have high stability, that way you get a lot of production. You don't push your empire sprawl to crazy points, which I think a lot of people are doing. They haven't really seen how bad the modifiers are for, leader upkeep, campaign cost, tradition cost, technology cost. Technology cost is like the least bad out of all of those, but still it's not worth going over until the late game. Once you go to the late game, you can expand enough that basically everything you need, all of your industry, all of your refineries are inside of your economy. But earlier on, use the market, have higher stability. It will probably work out for you. At least that's what I've found. And now we're going to talk about my last tip for this video, which is go for the Galactic Contenders Ascension perk. It's very nice. Ascension perks are underneath here, and as much as I like all these other things that we've taken, I think Galactic Contenders is easily the best, because if you take that, it allows you to run over and steal a home world off of a fallen empire as early as possible. Now we did that to the guys over here who have the ring worlds, which is so nice, just having these ring worlds, because they have these amazing buildings. Look at these buildings. If you haven't seen them yet, they're good. They're really, really good because they don't require pops. They just create stuff. And then sure, you're gonna have to create jobs outside of them, but that's not that hard to do with all these districts that they give you. Loads and loads of generator and farming districts. So if you take advantage of that, you're gonna have loads of energy and food that you can trade for your other stuff if this isn't making enough of it for you already. Look at that, 250 energy from one building slot. That alone makes rushing a fallen empire worth it. I think everybody still knows that, but I don't think a lot of people actually go for this civic to make it easier to take them down earlier. If you have plus 33% damage, you need a lot less firepower to take them down. I'm not going to say engage a fallen empire fleet that's bigger than yours, because of the way they work. They're going to fall back to their systems with very little damage, repair up, and then be able to attack you again. So you still want to have like twice their fleet power when you engage them in any situation. You might even be able to pull off a fleet in different directions if you let them wage war on you for a little bit, then move their fleets in different directions, and you can run in and pick off a couple with your main fleets. That's kind of what I did over here. At least that's what I remember doing. And the nicest thing about this one is you have all these ring worlds which you can rebuild and populate very easily if you take out this fallen empire. Other ones are still going to have nice things on their home worlds. Like this one, the Font of Knowledge, it has just as many great buildings. So really taking out any one of these fallen empires is going to be a giant boon to your empire. The other ones, the other Ascension perks, are, I think, good ones. There's one or two other ones left that I want to get, but none of them are nearly as good as Galactic Contenders, or maybe even Mastery of Nature and Technological Ascendancy. I'm a pretty big fan of this one. I almost made this the Ascension perk that we focused on, because it is nice. It allows you to make your internal economy bigger, which is usually very, very good. That's also a nice one because it keeps your sprawl from getting out of control. But still, I'm going to say that Galactic Contenders is currently my favorite Ascension perk, and I'd recommend you get that between the endgame stuff starting and the endgame crisis spawning. I think right now I have on the base settings so that the endgame was at 2,400, and that's when these guys woke up, or around that time, and the endgame crisis can spawn in like any point now. 50 years after that point, 2,450, the endgame crisis can spawn, and that means you should probably have taken out a fallen empire if possible. I'd recommend tackling one that has not awakened. And that's it for my 5 tips this time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure you leave a like on the video and to subscribe to the channel. I will be posting more stuff like this in the future, like I said earlier. And yeah, hope to see you around.